we'll go over to the software and show you a live system of what it looks like. This is a live analytics system with the e-bikes demo. So what we have at the top, this is what we call our lead time summary screen. We're going to emphasize this a little bit more, but all this is out of the box. It'll take less than a month with your ERP data to pull this information and to provide you a very quick set of analysis that can help you target and understand where you want to improve lead time. So here we see an actual target. Your actual lead time for this data is 72 days. And we set a target of in that 72-day range. There's some decimal point in rounding, but we're actually ahead of the curve. We're 3.3 days better than where we want to be. So we're green. In this demonstration, green is good, red is bad. So here are the two suppliers, a supplier and component, which has improved the most. Here's the supplier and the component, which has increased the most. So that's going in the wrong direction. Here on the lower left tile, the middle tile, I should say, is your lead time trend. And this represents your variance to your target over time. So red means we're above where we want to be. Green is good, that's below where we want to be. This tile to the next of it, to the right of it, represents suppliers which has improved the most, the green ones, and then suppliers that have gone in the wrong direction. Now, one of the key factors of lead time, what we saw post-COVID, right after the recovery, is that lead time was incredibly poor. Then we see it getting better, but what we see it is it's become more volatile. This is a standard deviation calculation that shows the volatility or variability of lead time by supplier. This may represent the suppliers by which you want to have better visibility with, because this can help you target when you have numerous suppliers, which ones do I focus on? This can give you one answer. So for example, we see at the top a supplier called Tech Group has a lead time of 41.9%. Let's call that 42. What that means in April, their lead time could be 100 days. In May, it could be 142. And in June, it could be 58. That type of volatility is what really impacts supply chains in a very negative way. And we want to help you smoothen that. We have numerous other charts. We show all your suppliers and their lead time on the lower left. Material groups. So this can represent component groups. And there was a question today about sequencing and hierarchies and so on. Well, this can represent here, based on a bike, we have 3 types of groups, but we have 8 different components. And then we have all your buyers. So this represents the buyers that are actually executing all the purchase orders in your system. So what can we do with this? One beautiful thing about SAP Analytics Cloud, or SAC, which this is based on, you don't see a lot of buttons because everything is a button. So here I'm going to look at that top supplier that exhibited the highest volatility. Now the beauty here is this screen can be executed or looked at by leadership, by management, or by individuals. The individual who manages Tech Group, the role that supplier manager can look at that supplier, and we see that there were 3 purchase orders, 3 people that work on that supplier. But look what happened. The last month, there was a huge spike. So that tells us what we want to look at, and we want to analyze this deeper. The deeper analysis is another page called the lead time analysis. This is what we call a heat map. The heat map can be configured by your own users, by their role. So an example is if there is a role and their focus is on logistics, I can look at my lead time city, by lane. These 4 on the y-axis, Brentwood, Grand Island, McKinney, and North Branford, represent your plants, your locations. And then the x-axis represents your supplier locations. And boom, I can see the red spots very quickly to see what's going on. I also have a predictive underneath that where I can look at lead time as it's going to go as a forward projection with a fairly simplistic triple exponential smoothing forecasting algorithm. If I have a supplier, if I have a team or a role that works and focuses on plant by material, here's what that user can do. So this user can look at 4 plants, and the components coming in and seeing which components, which plant's being impacted, and or which component is impacting that plant. So there's lots of different ways to look at this. Based on your role, what we would recommend is bookmarks where you can create these as stories. So I've created a few. So if you recall, we had that one supplier tech group with very volatile lead time. Now I want to take a look at what's going on with that supplier. You can set this up so that the role of the individual who manages either that material, that component, that supplier, or that category gets this screen when they open up this system. And I can be looking at this, and certainly through visual inspection, I can see that the Manchester facility in my business is what's really causing, I'm sorry, the supplier's business, getting this material from a supplier in Manchester. And this is one supplier tech group. That's what's causing my volatility. Just by selecting it, I can look at their trend and you notice 81, 94, 35, 84, 75, 111. Yes, it's spiked, but they've been very volatile across this whole time horizon. And that's what really hurts our planning. I can keep that filter, turn that on, turn that off, set it up for different roles. Roles do not have to be just by title. You may have a role that is by a category, by a specific problem. You may want 4 individuals in your team to focus on one problem. Let's create a small filter very easily, bookmark it, and now that team can look at this. They can share analyses. They can actually have a conversation in this system. Comment on Manchester. I can say, hey, Jose, can you please take a look at Manchester and tell me what's going on? Why is Manchester 82 days, whereas Jakarta is 64 days? That's almost a 20-day difference in what's happening in our business, which is really impacting our supply chain. We have lots of analyses. I always like to have fun by showing the geographic analysis, same color scheme, but I can look at this very easily through visual. Red again is bad, green is good. By hovering, I can actually see the spots, look at their lead time, and look at actually the number of purchase orders. And that's the size of the bubble. So the smaller the bubble, the less number of POs, but the color represents the, if you will, the severity of the problem. So I probably want to focus on large red bubbles. Here, as an example, it's a large green bubble. 41 POs, that's great, but 64 days lead time, that's below my target. That's where I want to be. Whereas over here, a mid-sized bubble, 38 purchase orders, 75 days lead time, which is above my 72-day target. So we can look at it that way, so that way others can view this. You can also look at outliers. What we find are financial executives. So if you have a financial role who wants to understand lead time impacts on inventory, which impact your days of working capital, your days of inventory, DIO, we can look at it here with what we call a box whisker. This lets you understand the relative spread of the lead time, but also a quartile analysis. So the simplest way to explain this is I may want to analyze those where the box is on the farthest to the right. It's big and far to the right, which tells me, again, there's a challenge. So there's different ways to assess, then different ways to analyze so that you can fix the problem. You can also have it based on supplier. So I have histograms on all the purchase orders. There was a question about a specific PO, what was happening. So I can actually look at, in fact, what the lead time was, what type of PO caused that lead time. I have the variability and so on.